Hi everybody, welcome to our 21st episode of Lee Strong. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are listening from. My name is Celine Floyd. I'm one of the directors of Capfinity's talent practice. Capfinity, we are coming up to 17 years old. We are experts in strengths-based assessment and development. We have offices in the UK, Australia and America, and we help organisations to harness the power of strengths from apprentice level all the way up to board level. And we are delighted to be here for another episode talking about a really fascinating topic, leading across global boundaries. I'm joined as ever by my wonderful co-host Steph. Hello, Steph.
Hi, Celine. Yeah, welcome everyone. Great to be here. I'm always so impressed that Celine remembers which episode number we're on. I always think I should have checked that beforehand because she always manages to mention it. But yeah, thrilled to be here and really looking forward to today's topic because I've spent the morning filled with lots of thoughts about working in a global organisation for 17 years, which I did, and all the different countries I worked in and all the challenges, but all the amazing richness I got from that time in my career. Like Celine, I'm one of the directors of the talent practice. Celine specialises in assessment. I specialise in development. And we've got two wonderful guests with us today who I am going to ask to introduce themselves. And it'd be lovely to hear from both of you in terms of, who you are in your careers, but also why you're passionate about leadership and, maybe leading across global regions as well. So let me come to Sophie first of all. Sophie.
Hi, good to be here. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Sophie Knight. I'm a director of CTV EMEA for Magnite. Magnite are a global advertising platform. What we do is we work with media owners to monetize their content with advertising. So that might be across your phone, your laptop, audio, outdoor or TV. I specifically look after CTV, and for those who might not know what that means, in digital advertising, there's lots of acronyms. It's basically streaming content to your TV via the internet. So that might be on your smart TV that you just have on your wall in your living room, or it might be through a connected device, such as an Amazon Fire Stick, an Apple TV, or an Xbox or PlayStation. So yeah, we work with all of these partners delivering advertising digitally onto your TV screens. I've worked in the industry since around 2006, started straight into the digital advertising world out of university. At that time, I didn't really know what that entailed or where that would lead me. But I've had a really successful career going from junior roles up to where I am now. I currently lead a team of 3 incredible women based in London, but we work across Europe. And then we also have European local teams that I work with directly. And also as a global company, I obviously work in tandem with the US, who is where our company is based. I also am a mentor for Bloom UK. Bloom UK encourages women in the marketing and advertising industry, kind of driving change, championing women's voices. And this really gives me an opportunity to work with someone outside of my business, advising them and using my experience to help support her and encourage her through her career in the digital landscape. And I'm passionate about leadership because I feel like it has such an impact on everyone around you, how everyone performs, how your team is inspired, how productive they are. And that really comes from a good leader. And just because you're a manager or anybody in a team, like being a leader anyone can be a leader. But I think it's just so important to have that positive impact and be a really good concise with what you want to do and how you want to drive your team forward.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sophie. Your organisation sounds fascinating. And be great to hear some of your insights as we get into the topic. Pauline, welcome. I know you're an old friend of Capfinity and Celine. So please tell us a bit about yourself.
Lovely, thanks, Stephanie. So good afternoon, everyone, or as Celine said, good morning or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. So my name is Pauline Caldwell, and I'm an HR professional with over 20 years working in professional services environments, so giving my age away a little bit. I have operated at global board and executive committee level. And I've got a very strong understanding of the complexities and the opportunities, I would say, of working in professional services environments. My most recent employed role was as the Global HR Director at Clyde & Co. And Clyde & Co. are a global law firm. And that's where I really had my experience of operating as a global leader, working across the 4 main jurisdictions of UK and Europe, North America, and Middle East and Asia Pac as well. So that's where I really cemented that global leadership experience. But I'm a bit of a lockdown statistic, I would say, and Celine is very familiar with this story, is that in 2020, lockdown number 1, I decided to change my career. And I left my global role after 10 years at Clyde's with very fond memories of a fantastic business and a fantastic team. I wanted to take a bit of time out, which I did, thinking, oh, this lockdown will be over soon and I'll go traveling and spend time with family. As we all know, that did not happen. So I decided to set up my own business, Momentum Business Consulting. And I've been very fortunate this past year to support a variety of clients from the legal, accounting, engineering, risk and healthcare sectors, kind of covering HR consulting, so the full range of, the HR cycle, some really interesting change projects, executive coaching, and most recently my first non-executive director position as well. So I'm really fortunate to have been celebrating 1 year of my own business, which brings me really to today, and connecting back with Celine recently as well. So that brings me to where we are today. And to answer your question about leadership and why I'm passionate about it, I think leaders can make or break individuals and organisations. And for me, it's as simple as that. You can either choose to have a positive impact or not. And I think people, if they understood more of the impact that they actually had on individuals, on teams, on groups, and on organisations, we would have much more productive and profitable businesses.
Brilliant.
Amazing. Thank you so much, both of you. I feel like with your respective experience and insights, we could easily fill an afternoon talking about this, but we will try our hardest to fit it into the time we have. And as you both described, and Steph, you too, at Catfinity, obviously we're a global organisation, all of our clients are global, and it's a part of the job that I've enjoyed for a really long time, is the diversity and the complexity that brings. And I was reflecting this morning on the effect of the pandemic, and we know that for a lot of organisations, it's really opening up the talent pool, the sense of you can really work from anywhere. And so the origination of talent and where that comes from is, that's really changing too. And we know that how we work with people from different regions in the world and different cultures has been of interest for people for a long time. And Erin Mayer, The Culture Map, her work, one of the flagship kind of books that was published. And I Googled actually when her first publication was, and it was 2014, which a bit like you, Pauline, made me realise how the years are whizzing by. So I remember when that was first published and thinking that was amazing. For those of you not familiar with Erin's work, that's looking at how people from different cultures can differ on key aspects of kind of working with each other, from how you build trust, how you might be inclined to give feedback to somebody, how you communicate, how you make decisions. And there are well-known differences that are in place normally for people depending on where you grew up or kind of the culture that you grew up around. And we know that effective global leaders, and this is the research showing, are those that can strike a balance between being really authentic to who themselves and their own cultural history, but can flex when they need to kind of really respond to the differences that there are around people. But it's a complex thing. And, Steph and I know, have done a lot of work with our global organisations, assessing and coaching them, that it's a difficult thing sometimes to get right. So first question, and the first kind of piece which we'd love your respective insights on, is in your experience and perhaps in your organisation organisations you've worked with. What does a good international kind of leader, global leader look like in terms of their behaviours or their values or their traits? You know, what do you see people that are good at this doing in contrast to those that might struggle? And I'll flip it this time and come to Pauline first. Pauline, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Celine. So, I mean, I know we've spoken about this over the years with the help that you've provided to me when I was at Clyde's, and taking time to reflect on this. For me, there's about 3 or 4 key things, I think. I think it's important that there's someone, the individual, really takes the time to understand the different stage of evolution each part of the global business is at, and that there's no one size fits all type of approach. I think that's been fundamental for me, because I think trying to shoehorn stuff in because the UK does it or another part, just, you know, you get that tissue rejection. I think then it's something around recognizing the importance or the contribution of all parts of the business, and that it's cyclical. So when you're up, that's great, but there might be someone else who's down, and it's not judging and not having your heroes, or, you know, it's always oh, well, you're getting the revenue at the moment, so you're the hero, and then you're back to not being the hero, and that kind of attitude. So I think understanding that cyclical element of businesses and their evolutions. And then also looking at, when you travel around the globe, what I used to love is seeing what really worked in the different parts of the business, and thinking, oh, I can take that and see that works over here, and share that knowledge and share that insight, because why reinvent the wheel if it's working somewhere else? Try it somewhere in another part of the globe, but not be wedded to it. And then I think my 4th thing is listen. And, you know, we've got two ears and one mouth for a very good reason. And I think that when I would travel with some senior leaders, you know, sometimes we could get a bit animated, saying, oh, so-and-so's told me this, we best take action. But actually it's a case of, well, yes, listen, but then let's reflect on it. Let's take the time to understand it and the implications of what we're being told before we start taking snap judgments, or making snap judgments and reactions, and then trying to get everybody else to change what they're doing because of, you know, a flyaway comment, perhaps. So those are my top 4.
Yeah, no, lovely. So what I'm hearing is, you know, people that can suspend judgment, perhaps, and that are quite humble in their approach and their appraisal of what's happening, and also being able to really read the complexity of the different parts of the organisation, and not thinking, you know, a one size fits all for everything. So that kind of appraisal. Okay, wonderful. And Sophie, does that mirror some of the things that you've seen in your experience?
Yeah, definitely. When I was thinking about it, like being adaptable to different people's viewpoints across different markets. Obviously, we work with like a US company predominantly, and then with our European local markets, and it doesn't always translate what they're doing in the US to Europe. Like they're such a massive, scalable, huge country who's developed a lot quicker than us in terms of technology and that kind of thing in what I'm doing. And so you really do have to take the viewpoints of people who are in market and locally, because if you don't do that, it just doesn't translate in the same way. It just can't always be applied. So I think it's really important that whoever's leading wants to make things work cohesively across all the markets. And that, as Pauline said, doesn't necessarily mean that there's a one size fits all. It could be that you have the same aims and objectives, but how you get there might have to differ, and you might have to tweak it and flex depending on how you want to approach your individual markets. Communication is obviously key in this, making sure that knowledge is shared across all markets. There's nothing worse than if one person has all of the knowledge, all of the power, and holds it for themselves, and doesn't really share that with the people that they're working with and who they want to operate everything on the ground, basically. Understanding all of those market differences, as I said, and the cultural and language differences. Working across Europe, you definitely identify that there's different ways that businesses operate together. The way that we do things in the UK can be a certain way. In France and Italy, they're smaller markets. People there are much closer. Things are done, or used to be done, or more socially on a business level, and you really have to kind of take notice of those and try and kind of fit in as a leader where you can, identifying those behaviours and then trying to kind of fit in there where you can, but also appreciating that if you don't speak the language, if you're not in the country, it is much harder to do that. And so I think those are, just being as a leader really clear in the direction and expectations and communicating that well and making sure that everybody really understands what the aims are and what you want to achieve.
Yeah, it sounds like you're both really leaning into this idea of being very considered and thoughtful in how you do things. And I guess there's an inherent danger, isn't there, in either perhaps stereotyping as well, perhaps a region or a country, and it's that feeling of really spending.
And sometimes you do get met with a bit of resistance from a market. So if you go with an idea, this is how we do things, this is how we want to do it across your market, they don't always want to do that. They have that pride in their own way of operating. And so you do have to be really flexible in how you approach that, how you kind of win them round, or the way that you kind of make it work in a different way. And it doesn't have to always be a carbon copy of what has been successful in one market. You can adapt it and change it so that it fits for what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think for me on that one, Sophie, it's about having a real interest in the business, but then also having a real interest in the people that then deliver that business for you, and then the impact that it not only has in that region or that office, but also on that society. And I've got a client that I've really been fortunate to work with this past year. They're an engineering business, and they talk about a sustainable, building a sustainable world. So they're, as engineers, they're always thinking about, well, how can this last forever? How can we have a positive impact? How can we reduce our carbon neutrality, or get to carbon neutrality and all of that? And actually their founder created that concept back in the 70s, and they still talk about it now. So it's really interesting that they've been able to create this kind of this ethos or this culture or this approach to whatever they do, and they talk about the sustainable built environment and for the greater good. And so I think having that understanding of how that business impacts everyone, regardless of where you are in the world, has really been quite powerful as well.
Feels like that's a really strong purpose, Pauline, which people can get behind, and regardless of culture, location, country. And is a lovely segue to my next question, Pauline. So thank you for that. I'll give you a fiver later. So I guess, one of the things that is a challenge is cultural norms, which can look different in different parts of the world. And we know from Maya's research that we interpret things in different ways, our similarities and differences in the way that something is considered normal or the way we do things varies a lot. And I think in some ways before the pandemic, it was all a lot easier in terms of you could get on a plane and go and land yourself in the middle of that office, and you could actually observe the differences firsthand. And of course, that has gone because we all look the same in our little boxes on Zoom. But actually, how is it? Some of the critical elements maybe of culture get missed. So I suppose one of the challenges we hear about is kind of creating, a consistent message across the company, like in terms of values, leadership framework, maybe purpose, but messages about how we do things around here. So how can an organisation ensure that those are consistent, but also relate them to different cultures? Sophie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I completely agree in the sense that having a purpose for each market is what you need to get people behind you. And also I think it, like we were saying just before, around things not working always in the same way, that often drives creativity and enables cross collaboration in teams, and that kind of can build a good way of looking at, this is how we do things around here, this is the main purpose, this is what we're aiming for. But actually giving people that creativity is really empowering for them, and I think that that's really important to give people that autonomy and that creativity. And then also I think like the value in being able to go and see people in real life again. So I think with the pandemic, it was a bit strange because we were working across European markets, but we also, I guess, like getting into the habit of video calls meant we actually had the ability to speak to our European counterparts more frequently than we maybe did, because before we would wait until we were in person. So even though that's like a small benefit of it, we definitely saw that we could share information more easily. It was quite convenient. And actually, in the last couple of months, we've actually started doing in-person meetings across Europe, and it has been fantastic. It's what our business has been craving. The benefits that you get from being in person with the teams that you, some of them that you've never met before, strategizing, aligning, like having, like bouncing off of each other and kind of getting ideas and getting things done. It's so much more effective. And yeah, so I'm really enjoying getting back to kind of that normality and traveling and bringing people together again. I'm not sure if I've answered your question there, but
I love it because I think the spontaneity came through. That is one of the big things that we get from being together in person, and
yeah,
that's just so hard to replicate virtually. And I think a lot of people are really appreciating things that we just took for granted in the past.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Pauline, what are your thoughts on those kind of frameworks, or the how we do things around here to get them consistent?
Well, I have a confession to make. When I first became an HR director, I decided we're all going to do it the same way, regardless of where we are in the world, because we weren't, as an HR team, as globally aligned, and we didn't have the gel that held everything together. So I thought, okay, well, let's get all of our people processes. We're going to join up. We're going to do it at the same time. We're going to do it in the same way. We're going to get all this, and we're going to have it, buttoned down. And then and everyone was very, polite and accepting of this, because I was promoted through the ranks and, bringing them on board and selling my story as to why. And everyone's going, okay, well, we'll let her do this. And then after a year, I just kind of went to my team. That didn't work, did it? And they went, yeah, Pauline, no, it didn't work. And it was a really fantastic learning point or learning moment for me to go, okay. And that's why I think it's so important for me. My reflections on that was, I really needed to take the time to understand the different stages of evolution each parts of the business were at, and not just the business, but where they were from a people perspective as well, and particularly culturally, the underlying culture within that. So, because obviously, again, very different. And so the way I approached it and my learning from that is get the philosophy right. Let's everyone get bought into what is the philosophy, whether it's your reward approach, whether it's your hiring approach, retention, etc. Get the overarching philosophy agreed. Get the boards and the partnership from my world bought into that. And then you allow the local business and the local market to apply it in their way. I think that's your point, Sophie. Allow them to do what they know works best in their environment and their culture, so that you don't get that tissue rejection, that you don't get the states going, what the hell do these, Brits across the pond know? I know my world and I know how to get the best out of people. And so for me, that was the biggest learning curve of, trying to do it with the best of intentions, but then recognizing that it just wasn't practical. And that was more about how I wanted to do it rather than what worked for the people and for the business and for those different markets. So the key, and I think the key word that comes to mind when I think about it, trust your people, trust them and let them get on with it.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have that combination. You really need like a set of standards and processes, so people aren't just off going completely in the wrong direction. So there needs to be a focus, but allowing that creativity and in market, them knowing best, trusting that is really important. And I've definitely recognized that a lot more going back into different markets and speaking to people. You definitely see that they appreciate that way of working a lot more. People are a lot more enthusiastic. People want to get behind what you're doing when that's the case, rather than coming in as like a dictatorship and saying, this is what you have to do and it has to be done like this, because it doesn't necessarily always work. it might
Yeah,
not
I was
succeed.
just going to say, Sophie, what I've seen in my experience is when you come into heavy-handed, actually that's when you get the most dangerous of behaviour, which is seemingly agreeing and appearing to be on board, but actually that region or that market or country actually just doing their own thing anyway, and that kind of get it all hidden. And so that much more empowering style, which we know is good for leaders and leadership generally, is what I'm hearing. It maybe becomes even more important when you're trying to do that across borders. Okay, wonderful. What an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. It's been brilliant to hear your views, and from such different industries actually in terms of experience, but as we would imagine, a lot of synergy, which just proves time and time again it doesn't matter what industry you're in. When you're talking about people, it's often all the same. It's been we've had a lot of kind of really good content, I think, from you both in terms of hints and tips and things for organisations to think about. We started looking in the first instance at what a successful global or international leader is like, and the really strong messages that I heard from you both was around being considered and being thoughtful and being open-minded, being agile, and having a degree of humility with which enable someone to go into another country and to work with colleagues from a different culture and to really listen and to try to understand what they need and how the business should best work for them in that market. I think that humility and considered nature seems to be really successful when you're leading people from different countries. We then spoke most recently organisationally what's useful to think about when you are trying to grow or to be successful around the world, and how do you strike that balance between having consistency but getting the message right, so that you have differences that account for individual differences. And you were both talking about fantastic things like appreciating that one size doesn't fit all, that trust is really important, setting out your philosophy or your standards and then allowing markets to interpret that in the way that will best work for them, which I think is really important. And then finally we spoke about purpose and how purpose and that North Star vision and allowing people the autonomy to again interpret that and what it means for them is really important. So as always, we could have filled hours talking about this, but it's been a joy to hear your views. Perhaps I may come to you each in turn for your parting pearls of wisdom for the audience today. So Pauline, what's your final reflections on what we've discussed?
So I have many, Celine, but I'll try and whittle it down, which is don't try to put a square peg in a round hole, be it people or process. Be flexible to the different ways of operating, review and rework. Don't dig your heels on and just think, I've said it, so I'm going to do it regardless of what happens. You've always got to have that flexibility. Listen, ask a lot of questions, but be brave, be quite brave, and be more human about your way in which you go around things. And remember that none of us are the stereotype that we think we are or think other people are.
Love that. Thank you, Pauline. And Sophie?
I tend to agree. I think that having a clear purpose that all markets in the business can get behind is imperative, and to have objectives and goals in mind, but understanding that one size doesn't fit all, and that might not always be right. And therefore, like having the confidence and the trust in the individual markets, in the individual team members, and that they will find the best way to achieve that shared purpose and that end goal. I think that's what's most important.
I love that. Trust. Thank you, Sophie. And Steph?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. And the thing that I keep coming back to is the importance of staying curious, because whenever something's different to me, and that could just be gender, education, location, doesn't have to be the global thing necessarily. The human reaction for me is to judge that behaviour and to try and interpret it. But actually, if I can just stay curious to why someone might be doing something in a different way and wait to understand, I think that's the foundation for me of building a really strong relationship as a leader with the other person.
I love that. I was listening to Fern Cotton's latest podcast, and there was a guy there who said, wouldn't the world be different if we each said 3 times under our breath, I may be wrong, I may be wrong, I may be wrong. That kind of curiosity. So yeah, wonderful. Thank you all. Wonderful parting thoughts. Pleasure to have had this conversation. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to everyone who has listened, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you for our next episode 22. Yeah,
thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.